All right. Let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. Sergeant Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President,
All right, Senators, we are very pleased this morning to have Rabbi Gary Pokras from Temple Beth Ami in Rockville, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 17th District. Please rise for the invocation.
Honorable senators, staff, and guests, let us pray. Eternal and merciful Creator, blessed are you, the source of all wisdom and understanding, the one who guides the destiny of nations and individuals alike. For this land so richly blessed, we raise our voices in thanks. Your children have come to these shores from many lands in quest of liberty and new life. Here they found safe haven, soil on which to prosper, and the opportunity to build a better future. For our nation and the state of Maryland, for its freedom promised, attained, and yet to be enlarged, for the richness of its natural blessings, and for a harmony that we pray will ever increase among its citizens, we give thanks. God of justice and right, we seek your blessing and your guidance as our senators undertake the weighty task of governance. We stand before you, acknowledging the diversity of this great state and the responsibilities entrusted to our esteemed senators. Grant, O God, your wisdom and discernment to this Senate body. May their decisions be just, fair, and rooted in compassion for the people they serve. Bestow upon them the strength to navigate the complexities of governance with integrity, humility, patience, and courage in pursuit of the common good. Guide our senators to be ever mindful of the impact of their decisions on the lives of those they represent. May their policies and actions reflect a deep and genuine concern for the welfare and flourishing of every individual in our great state, especially the vulnerable in our midst. May your Spirit imbue our senators with clarity and purpose, that their service may reflect your timeless values of justice and compassion, and inspire us all with vision that united we may realize our common goals for the well-being of our people, our state, and our nation. Then surely the words of the prophet will ring true as we let justice well up as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. In your holy name we entrust the work of this chamber, seeking your blessings for the senators and the people of Maryland. And we say, Amen.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the senator from the 17th District.
thank you, Mr. President. Rabbi Pokras is a community builder, a faith leader, and a representative of not just District 17, but District 15, and I would dare say District 39. He brings an engagement and an activism support with our local nonprofits to support neighbors in need, to make sure that we all realize Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. In addition to asking that his wonderful prayer be journalized, I want to recognize that he brought Debbie Ezrin with him, who's the executive director of Beth Ami, and the mom of Melanie Ezrin, my fabulous former intern, who is now working on Capitol Hill for U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, and just beautiful family. Wonderful. So welcome Debbie Ezrin, and thank you to Rabbi Pokras for being with us today. Thank you, President.
Thank you so much, Senator. And without objection, most certainly we will journalize the wonderful invocation. Appreciate the work across Montgomery County, across in Maryland, and hope that your daughter's doing well on Capitol Hill as well. Excellent. So thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? Let's see. All right. If so, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. We have several resolutions today. We have the senator from the 5th District. We have South Carroll, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, good morning, colleagues. today I'm excited to have the opportunity to welcome a championship program from my district, South Carroll High School Field Hockey. And I just want to read a little bit about this outstanding group of young ladies and coaches. After ending the 2022 season as the 1A state finalist in a tough loss against Pocomoke, South Carroll Field Hockey came back for the 2023 season knowing their potential and more importantly, knowing there was work to be done. Throughout their season, the girls of South Carroll Field Hockey faced multiple tribulations, injuries, formation changes, county rivals, but managed to finish their season as the second seed for the county with a 9-3 record. After a dramatic game with Francis Scott Key High School, the girls were able to bring home the 1A West Regional Championship for the second season in a row, but the drama wasn't over yet. The state semifinals brought them another overtime game with 2 10-minute overtime sessions, 5 rounds of one-on-ones, and a sudden death shootout to finally come out on top against Patuxent in the semifinal. South Carroll Field Hockey was headed back to the 1A state championship game to take on Pocomoke and get redemption. This was their second state championship appearance in 2 years, and this time the South Carroll Field Hockey ladies were able to bring home another state title and were crowned the 2023 1A state champions. They're joined by head coach Kayla Holston, principal Christina Daugherty, the athletic director Tim Novotny is here, and also one of their assistants is Molly Cole, who worked for former delegate Haven Shoemaker, and she's an assistant with the team. I'd ask I would ask that the clerk read the resolution in full. That's how that goes. Thank you.
Clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to South Carroll High School Field Hockey Team in recognition of winning the Class 1A State Field Hockey Championship. We applaud your outstanding season and wish you many more. Congratulations. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 12th day of March, 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the ladies of South Carroll High School Field Hockey Team, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates and congratulates you on your Class 1A State Field Hockey Championship. Congratulations. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Keep that excellence on the field and in the classroom, right? Both ways. Very good. Thank you all for being here. And not to be outdone, the Senator from District 9 had a few, Senator from District 33 had a few. It appears South Carroll also has a few, and we're going to go back to the Senator from the 5th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am pleased to present South Carroll High School golf, men's golf, here to recognize them as well. In the fall of 2021, a nearly entirely new group of players came out to golf tryouts at South Carroll High School. The team would consist of 7 players, which were all sophomores and freshmen, and despite being the smallest and youngest group that head coach Joseph had seen in nearly 20 years, they possessed a passion, drive, and focus that left him feeling something special was coming. 2022 would start with the Cavs keeping the momentum going. They posted school records in their first 9-hole match of the season, and the team would go on to be district and county champions and make a run at the state title. They came up 3 strokes short in 2022. In August of 2023, a focused, driven, and charismatic young team returned with a sole focus for the season to win the state title. The Cavs team worked together every day to reach their goal. They had an unprecedented team match average of 154, which is nearly 40 strokes lower than their team from 2 years before, and they would go on to be district and county champions. Patrick Carl, Jack Lauer, Chase Loden, and Michael Valerio would head off to the state championships in October to represent the team in their bid to make school history, and after day 1, they had a 13-stroke lead. They were chased by several other teams, but they came out on the last day of the tournament and did what they did best all season, remain calm and play great golf. When the scores were compiled, the Cavs' 2-day stroke total of 633 put them 25 strokes ahead of their nearest competitor and earned them the first ever South Carroll High School state championship title for golf. So, Mr. President, I would ask that the clerk read the resolution in full.
Clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to South Carroll High School golf team in recognition of winning the Class 2A-1A State Golf Championship. We applaud your outstanding season and wish you many more. Congratulations. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 12th day of March, 2024.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the gentlemen of South Carroll High School golf team, 25 strokes ahead of the next closest competitors. It's pretty impressive. Tiger Woods level there. The Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your Class 2A State Golf Championship. Congratulations. Well done. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Mr. President, I've also been told they are available for your four-man scrambles for a price.
Nice. Yeah,
NIL
very
is now
good.
legal in the state,
Very
so you
good.
can have them come out to your golf tournaments.
Excellent. You always like the ringers. Always like the ringers. That is not me. That is not me. All right. Let's see. Do we have, I think that does it for resolutions. Senator from the 45th District has some guests.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I got two different groups, if that's okay. Mr. President, today we're joined by the Maryland Philanthropy Network. And for folks that do not know what the Philanthropy Network is, just look at a group of philanthropic organizations that understand what partnership look like. And Mr. President, when we think about that partnership, we think about that it can't get done without government, it can't get done without community, but also in shared interests, it cannot get done without our philanthropic organizations. I just want to make sure that I lift up Madam President, CEO, Denise DeHunt, who's also here with us. And if you all can stand so we can give a round of applause for MPN, Maryland Philanthropic Network.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your work as well.
And Mr. President, for the second one, I have a shadow for today. His name is Ian Smith. He's an 8th grader. He's homeschooled. He's in the gallery at this moment. So, Ian, if you can please stand up, and colleagues, if you all can give a shout out to this young, brilliant scholar, please, Ian, please accept your round of applause.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Shadowing an excellent senator here, so you get to see the real deal. Get to see the real deal. Excellent. All right. Additional guests. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from the 38th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really would like my colleagues to join me in welcoming my cousin, Ed Rowe, and his son, Leo, and his beautiful wife, Lauren. And Ed used to work for the Secretary of State's office and now is a successful realtor down on the shore. We pulled them down to Maryland's coast, and they're here visiting, and please give them a warm welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for traveling the bridge to join us today. Senator from the 26th.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. Today we're going to, I have two guests in the gallery. Today we're going to vote on SB 567, the Cameron Carden Act, the Public Institution of Higher Education. Cameron, who I'll introduce in a moment, went through a tough experience, mental health experience while in college, just about had a breakdown. He wanted to leave school. The problem was they were going to charge him for the entire semester anyway. And so he was making a decision between leaving school or not. They came down to Annapolis, and we will have before us today, named after him. Please stand, Cameron, the Cameron Carden Act, and that will handle that problem so that mental health is treated as any other challenge, be it physical, etc., that when that happens, especially in our colleges today when there's a lot of depression and suicidal attitudes, he's here. His mom, stand up please, his mother, Gay Green Carden, we went to church together, sang on the choir together many moons ago. And you made a difference today, son. My godson, you made a difference for so many people here in the state of Maryland. Would you give them a warm Senate welcome?
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Recognizing the Majority Whip, Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. you know, it was, I cannot tell you all how excited I am to be standing here. The school that I'm about to present is a school that I was very instrumental in helping to be placed in the 24th Legislative District. As a matter of fact, I was there when they put the shovel in the dirt. And it has produced, this school has produced some of the best and the brightest. But it had an excellent start, Mr. President, with a woman by the name of Helena Noble Jones. She was so wonderful and put that school on the right track. As a matter of fact, she was instrumental in writing the words to the song of Charles Herbert Flowers. That school is here visiting here with us today, and I also want to give recognition to the wonderful principal that's in that school. I'd like for the students at Charles Herbert Flowers to please stand, because I am immensely proud of you, and I'm even more proud of the way that you conduct yourself in the school, and I'm even more excited that you have one of the most wonderful, wonderful administrators that God ever created. I am just so proud of you. So may you continue to do well, listen to your parents, and do the right thing, and you will be successful in life. So ladies and gentlemen, would you please give these rising stars, we got a few here on the floor here, there they are, would you give them a rousing applause?
Welcome, welcome. The good senator is also an educator, so certainly knows exactly what she's talking about.
And Mr. President, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the educators, the teachers that are in the trenches at Charles Herbert Flowers. The educators that you see here, educators, please stand. The volunteers that are here, please stand. These people standing are rare breeds, because they spend long hours ensuring that the young people in that school are successful. They come in early in the morning, stay late at night. We can't pay you enough money for what you do for these young people who are going to grow up to be the best and the brightest. So we thank you, we love you, a bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck.
Thank you to our educators. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Recognize the senator from the 33rd District.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have two special guests here with me today on the floor. If they could please stand up. Mr. and Mrs. Paul and Angie Robb. They are longtime residents of Crofton. I had a lovely time meeting with them and chatting with them earlier about our beloved State House and what incredible history we have here. And if their name sounds familiar, it's because they are the parents-in-law of our beloved Miss Sally Robb. So if you could give them a warm welcome and a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Excellent. Very good to have you all here. Yes, Chair, recognize the senator from the 43rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our physician of the day is my 43rd District resident, constituent, and neighbor, Dr. Padmi Rashin. Rasha Singh, sorry. She is an assistant professor of internal medicine at Johns Hopkins University, and she is president-elect of MedChi. Please give her a warm Senate welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your work. Thank you. All right, I think that does it. Did we get everybody? It appears so. All right, so we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. Senators, as you can see, we have a lot of work to do today. So we're going to try and get through it. We'll see where we get. It's going to be a long week, so just let's be prepared. Start with our layover calendar, calendar 17. Clerk, read the bill.
Senate Bill 360, the President Budget Bill Fiscal Year 2025. Question is on the adoption of the 147 committee amendments and the favorable report.
I saw the bite being taken right as I started to hand it, so I will stall for a moment as we
There's peanut butter.
Recognize the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move a special order to this for the appropriate time tomorrow.
All right, the chair moves to special order the bill at the appropriate time tomorrow. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. We've got another one, no more, it's coming right now. Let's see, number 18, clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 362, the President Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2024. Questions on the adoption of the 35 committee amendments and the favorable report.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move special order to the appropriate time tomorrow.
Senator moves to special order. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. The bill will be taken up at the appropriate time tomorrow. Remember, senators, if there's any issues, please make sure to get them to the chair and the committee 24 hours in advance to the degree feasible here. All right. Let's go to layover calendar number 19. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 683, Senator Hester, Tree Expert Licenses, Workers' Compensation and Insurance Requirements, and Application and Renewal Fee Alterations. Questions on the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right. Question is on the two committee amendments. Chair recognizes the minority whip on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. We need to adopt the report. I have an amendment, but it's not, yep.
All right, questions on the committee amendments? Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Discussion? Objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. The minority whip has an amendment. The pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Give us just a moment to get it on the board. All right, the senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had some discussion about this last night, just to refresh the body's memory, because we had a lot we did last night. This bill raises the fee for tree expert licenses, and there's some things in the bill I think are good, but it does raise the fee pretty significantly. But of bigger concern to me is that there's language on page 3, line 30 of the reprint that strikes out. Current law was or is that a person who holds a license and wishes to renew it shall pay a fee set by the department by regulation in an amount not to exceed the cost of processing the license renewal. This language is bracketed out in the reprint. This amendment that I'm offering would just restore that language, because I think we want to be sure that we're not causing this fee to just be able to go up and up and up without a real tie to the cost of the program. And so I would move the amendment, Mr. President, and ask for the body's support.
All right, the senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Colleagues, I'd like to ask you to resist this amendment. It is not a friendly amendment. DNR's testimony states that the program needs to do a lot more than process the applications. This includes background checks, proctoring exams and licenses, triaging and reviewing complaints against the licensed tree experts, conducting investigations, collaborating with the Natural Resources Police, approving and issuing continuing education units, and performing outreach. I'd also like to remind the body that the amendment, as amended, this has the Maryland Arborist Association support. And in their letter, they say they're continuously hearing from membership about concerns with individuals who are operating wrongfully without a license or abusing their licenses and not properly being enforced. So with this amendment, the Maryland Arborist Association is really looking forward to your favorable vote on this bill, but not this amendment.
Okay, on the amendment, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not,
well, Mr. President, at the risk of going against the powerful tree arborist lobbyists, wonderful people, but I'm happy they're supporting the bill. And again, I think the overall intent of the bill is good. Once again, though, we're already doubling the fee, more than doubling the fee. So that should cover, in this bill, that should cover the cost here. I can't believe, by the way, we're saying that they weren't doing any of this before. I know they were not. There were some things they were not requiring that the bill now requires that, again, I don't think is bad. I think this bill would be a much stronger bill with this language still in to protect consumers and protect our small businesses that are engaged in this kind of work. Mr. President, I would ask for a roll call on the amendment.
All right. Any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? I think we generally have an idea on the issue, so the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. No. With 32 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Do we have any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 683 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we've got layover calendar number 20. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 126, Senator Augustine, Transportation WMATA Operating Assistance Alteration, Maryland Metro Funding Act of 2024. Question is on the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right, question is on the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 126 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go to our special order calendar, number 40. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 738, Senator King, Freedom to Read Act. Question is on the adoption of the three committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right, question is on the three committee amendments. On the amendments and the favorable report, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if I could ask the floor leader to yield for question.
Will the floor
or
leader
two.
yield? Appears so. Senator may proceed.
Thank you so much. Mr. President, we've had a dialogue a little bit, the floor leader and I, offline about a couple of items with this bill. So I want to just kind of go through, be sure to understand where we are. The bill, the overarching goal of the bill, when it came in, it had all libraries, including school libraries, essentially would become under the same statute and allow that state library standards would also be school library standards, and that if there was a change, if a school library was doing something different than a state library standard, there could even be perhaps financial penalty. That was the original bill. Is that your recollection?
I could provide some further clarification. All libraries are already written to the education code, so that doesn't change. And also setting the standards for employment, that doesn't change. And the funding of our libraries, both the public libraries and the school libraries, are the same. So this bill doesn't change any of that.
So this bill does not change the current setup of how state libraries are funded or overseen, or school but it does make a change to now how school systems oversee their libraries, correct?
What it does, as we discussed, is that it sets standards for the entire system that are recognizing the libraries, all libraries, as partners in our educational system, and ensuring that there are pillars similar that we've established in the blueprint, that there are pillars also in the library systems.
Is there now in the bill with the committee amendments that we are going to adopt here shortly, is there still a provision where the state library system can ask the comptroller to withhold funds from a school system?
As we have in the blueprint, there are accountability measures that are encoded in law around ensuring that all school systems, ensuring that all libraries are in line with the goals that we have set forth as a state.
But my understanding, as I read the original bill, there's new language here about what school libraries, local school systems have to do with their school libraries and I don't see the language anymore that would say that the state library system can tell the comptroller to withhold funds from a county school system.
Thank you. Yes, not specifically that.
Correct.
We're not
Obviously,
telling,
if a county school system it starts violating rules under Kerwin
Right.
for anything they're doing, library or otherwise, they could have funds withheld.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Okay.
I didn't understand.
I was just clarifying. Okay. Can I ask, let me ask a question, because I see in the reprint we have, there's a requirement that every school system put in place a policy for how they're going to handle materials
Right.
in the school library and what cannot be excluded, right? There's a list in here of what cannot be excluded, and it talks about the materials, services, and resources that are provided for interest, information, or instructional support of students and staff or personnel. They may not materials may not be excluded from the school library media program because of the origin, background, or views of the individual who created the materials. That's what's in there, and that seems fine to me. They also has in here that you cannot exclude materials because of the partisan, ideological, or religious disapproval, which that would mean that even somebody external could complain about something, but if it's a partisan complaint, ideological complaint,
Right.
or that talks about a religion, I don't agree with that religion, you can't have materials excluded for that purpose. That's what that
Right.
means.
And that's in response to what we're seeing across the country, where externally organized entities have developed a list. That list is circulated, and so the concerns may not necessarily have originated with the home area, but maybe externally motivated. But again, the purpose is that we should have standards. We haven't had standards, and so we're setting those across the board.
So in situations, thank you. So in situations where groups have complained about, like you always hear about To Kill a Mockingbird used because of the outdated, obviously racist language in it. Does this bill exclude someone from complaining about To Kill a Mockingbird in a school library?
No, Mr. President.
As an example.
Yeah, as an example. No, this specifically, it establishes, and that you'll find that on the reprint on page 2, the policies and procedures developed shall establish a uniform process. So that's the most important thing, is that we don't want our libraries, our librarians, et cetera, feeling that these decisions are arbitrary. And so it's just setting out, asking the school systems to, set a uniform for everyone, for the school libraries, and that, and then there's a couple of other.
Okay. No, that's good to know. So if a school system, a local school system, wants a policy that deals with age appropriateness or sexual explicitity, that's not a word, something that's sexually explicit or graphic, this bill doesn't forbid them from having a policy about that as long as it's clear, published, and it would be subject to other regulation, but this law is not really touching on that. It's giving a broad framework.
Yeah, correct. The law is silent on the specifics, but we are pressing that we ensure that there is a consistency, and that,
A transparent, consistent process is what we're looking at. Okay, great. All right, that's good to know. And I have a few concerns about some of it, but I do at least understand we're trying to do a broad framework, so that's great. There's other things in the bill here. One is establishing a uniform process to submit an objection. This is all new language in the school library portion of the bill, because I really don't have an issue with the state library portion at all. My concern was, I believe school libraries are a little bit different than public libraries. Public libraries, I think you should have there should be very few restrictions on a public library. Obviously, there should be care taken to not have certain materials that kids can get their hands on that are not age appropriate. But I'm a believer, though, that school libraries are different. And I think a lot of people would agree with this. School libraries are different because it's children coming for instructional purpose. The goal of the school library is education. And so, and also, there are not parents bringing their kids to a school library. So I think you want to have a lot broader spectrum of like stuff in the school library that can be broadly supported. But that's good to know that what we're trying to do is just say you don't want to exclude something from a school library for partisan reasons or ideological reasons.
All the same criteria are the same for both public and schools. And again, as the bill came in, it wasn't drafted that way. But again, for the sake of consistency across the system,
okay,
they're the same set of policies for schools as.
My belief is that school libraries probably should be a little tighter, but I'm glad we're having this discussion. Know that there is an ability for a local system to have some other parameters as long as it doesn't go against this framework. and that would be regulated by the boards and MSD, correct? Not by, okay. And then finally, I think, well, there was two other issues that I want to raise questions about and just be sure that we're clear on. So it's going to require a uniform process to submit an objection, but it does require that materials under review due to an objection remain available for use by students and school personnel until the review process is concluded. I'm concerned that, I know we don't want things moved off the shelves interminably while they're being reviewed, but why there wasn't more of a time limit on that? Because if something, at this point, if we pass this law, we're already saying you can't take something off the shelves just because it's written by a liberal or a conservative or because it's written by a Muslim or a Christian or what. You can't do that. You can't do that. So the only thing that would be being objected to that a school system could even consider removing would be something much harsher potentially than that. So why wouldn't we want to allow for there to be a period of time where they would remove materials off just to review in this new process and then put them back on?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I don't believe we're in a position here as the legislature to make determinations of that nature. So to either assume that whatever is decided to be reviewed must be of a level that all would agree that it's not appropriate. And so again, that's why ultimately a decision about the process is important, and that these policies be set locally. There's nowhere where we set any type of time limits. Also, there is I guess a concept of innocent before, being, guilty, and so to take it off presumes already that it's that it's not suitable. So
well, in response, Mr. President, if I might, in response, wouldn't we want in a school library to err on the side of caution, again with some reasonable time limits, to say if it's been objected to, number one, the objection has to meet whatever policy the county would set under this framework, and wouldn't it be wise to say, well, here's a period, a window where you could pull something off while you're reviewing it, and it's not innocent till proven guilty. It's more like, you're on trial basis, to make sure that the material is appropriate for that age group, for example.
Yeah, Mr. President, I just think we disagree. This bill does not seek to set any parameters of time other than the broad pillars. And I will just be repeating myself to say that we do not wish. I think it's very important to not preemptively censor and to allow for a period of censorship prior to review.
Okay. Thank you for the answers. I think we disagree, but I appreciate the answers. Thank you. And then the final question I have on this that I do think it's important to recognize, there's a section here, it's on line 7 of page 2 of the reprint. A county board may not dismiss, demote, suspend, discipline, reassign, transfer, otherwise retaliate against a librarian, certified library media specialist, or school library media program support staff for performing their job duties consistent with the standards described under subsection A of this section, which is what we've just been discussing, is this program. Yeah. To me, it seems pretty unusual that we would be delving into personnel for county school systems. Because and let me say why, because I understand there's always people talk about concerns about people being picked on or whatever. There's already a collective bargaining process for school personnel. So if someone feels they've been wrongly reassigned or certainly wrongly terminated, there's a whole process already in place, and you can't fire somebody because if they've been staying consistent with what's policy. So or even you can't even demote somebody without just cause in a public school environment. So why do we have that in the bill?
I think you'd agree, given the nature of all that has been around this issue, that ensuring that if our state employees or if our librarians are implementing with fidelity as we would the blueprint, that there's an understanding that they are a part of the system and that they are protected. So additionally, the state is involved in lots of aspects. I mean, we support the pensions, we pay for the libraries. We have a formula. So while we've rarely, I guess, invoked this, I think it's appropriate in this context.
Okay. I think my concern with putting this in law is it seems like it's setting up this other standard that's just outside of the normal personnel standards for school employees.
So we have things in regulation, and so we're codifying as well. So it goes back and forth. There's regulation, and then there's codifying things in regulation.
Okay, so this is in regulation
no,
already?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's not unusual for us to do that.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Mr. President, I think there's a couple concerns I'd like to perhaps touch on, but we should, once we've done the report. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, any further discussion on the amendments? Any objection to the committee amendments? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. The Minority Whip has amendments to the bill. Pages will collect and distribute. Uh-oh, one moment. We lost the bill. So we are on... Okay. Give us just a moment here. We'll get this amendment loaded up. All right. All right, the senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just, in offering this amendment, I raised one concern in my questioning about not allowing, the way the bill is written is it doesn't allow you to remove any material while you're reviewing it. And I think that's a mistake, and I tried to talk a little bit about it in my questioning, but to me, school libraries and the standards for school libraries are different than a public library in this way. You want to be a lot more careful, particularly when talking about elementary and middle school especially. You want to be a lot more careful about things. And what's been happening a lot is you'll see a book that will get into circulation in a school library, and it's not really the fault necessarily of the media specialist or whatever per se. A lot of times they're just taking books that have been recommended. But a lot of the literary groups are recommending books that essentially are like sort of trashy romance novels, but for like kids, for teenagers. And so some of the stuff that's been in the news, like even from my county, has been more about like just a book that ended up in a school library that was like, you read the excerpts, you're reading it, and I actually took time to look through a number of the books that people had complained about. You find a lot of stuff in there like, this is really, like, this shouldn't be in a school library. Like if you want your 13-year-old to read this, you can go to the public library. It's on your own time. I bring that up to say this. I think there are times where you're going to have materials where it ought to be pulled off and looked at. But I understand the argument that you don't want stuff pulled off for 6 months. There should be a process where it's adjudicated. So from my perspective, Mr. President, what this amendment would do would just simply say you can remove it for the first 15 days after the objection is put in, which means if it's something that's really like, hey, this is real bad, within 15 days you can be like, hey, we should probably put this on ice. And if you can't determine it within 15 days, well then it goes back on the shelf because it wasn't that much of an emergency. So I would ask for support for the amendment, Mr. President, and I think it's very reasonable. It's a very short time period, just 15 days. And that way, if there is something that, there's some stuff, and I'm not going to read, I could sit here and read some things that have been sent to me that I know are in books that have been found in school libraries. I'm not going to do that. But I would encourage the body not to give into the sort of the common thing I hear is, oh, it's just a bunch of people complaining about somebody talking about sex in a book. There's stuff that's like, you're like, why was this ever in a school library? It has no historical, it's not a classic piece of literature. So I think there's appropriate things that can be objected to, and that's why I think it'd be smart to just have a 15-day, let's remove it for 15 days. If it's something that is kind of like, whoa, this probably just slipped through the cracks, we can remove it. And if it's not that severe, then it should go back on the library while it's being looked at by a committee. So I ask for support for this amendment, Mr. President.
All right, Senator has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank the amendment sponsor for sharing with this, but I'm going to ask the body to resist this amendment. The process that we've developed and has been recommended by the superintendent is consistent with the review process for Supreme Court standards, so that's one thing. Additionally, I just want to remind the body that the bill simply guides for the development and the implementation of a policy to review objections. Also, it does stipulate that it requires materials under review due to an objection to remain remain available. However, they also direct the libraries to establish a reasonable timeline to conduct and conclude the review process. So again, to my earlier statement, the time that an individual library system needs to review varies, so we would not want to impose that. So again, I ask for the body to reject this amendment. Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the amendment. I think it's very reasonable and very friendly. I think there's a lot of things that can be in question, and this is something that we can say just for 15 days. Just pause, just for the moment, and look into this and just say, okay, within a reasonable time, which is not even a little more than 2 weeks, to look into this and to say if it was okay, if it was not okay, so we can answer to that. And I think it's, again, a very friendly and a reasonable amendment, and we would like to see a roll call. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion on the amendment? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Minority has another amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, the senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We talked about this again briefly a few minutes ago. So my concern, other concern with this new version of this bill, I think there were some good clarifications made in the amendments, but this part I think we should take out. I don't think we should be putting in state law and trying to dictate to county school systems how they handle their personnel. There's a very carefully balanced process with how our school systems do personnel. There is collective bargaining. There's a chain of command, very clear chain of command at the superintendent level. And so this amendment would just take this part out of the bill dealing with who can and cannot be moved or demoted, because quite often, if anything were to happen in this regard, there's already a process in place. But also, we don't have any evidence that this has happened anywhere in Maryland either. And so I don't know that this language is necessary, and I think it infringes on the school system's ability to manage their personnel appropriately. So, Mr. President, I would ask for support for the amendment.
All right, floor leader moves the adoption of the amendment. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The maker of the amendment has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I thank the sponsor of the amendment for sharing. I will just reiterate that this is simply, well, it does two things. It affirms librarians as our partners and just their importance in the implementation of these new pillars and standards for our library systems. And two, it affirms that someone should not be fired for doing their job. So I ask for you to resist this amendment.
Okay, on the amendment, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, let's hear from the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just ask for a roll call, please.
All right, senators requested a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 738 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go ahead and start with JPR. We got a lot coming out of JPR. Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th district.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make sure that I was recorded properly for the amendment vote on Senate Bill 683. It's Amendment 683/123324/1. I want to make sure that I'm recorded in the green.
In the green. The senator wishes to be recorded in the green. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizing the senator from District 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to make sure that I am recorded correctly on the amendment for Senate Bill 683, floor amendment 1233241. I was recorded as excused, and my vote is nay. Thank you.
All right. If we could just get the, if the pages could collect the form. But there was the vote was recorded. Is that correct? It was recorded, but it was a switch from excused to nay. All right, any objections? Without objection, so ordered. All right, let's go to judicial proceedings. Report number 13. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 182, Senator Sidnor, Criminal Procedure, Facial Recognition Technology Requirements, Procedures, and Prohibitions, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Senate Bill 182 is the exact same bill that we passed last year, but for one amendment. What this bill does is it provides some guidelines and some guardrails for the use of facial recognition technology by law enforcement agencies. It provides some audit and some reporting requirements as well. There was the one committee amendment that adds information on the age, race, and gender of individuals subject to the use of facial recognition technology to a required report on the bill. I would move the favorable committee report as well as this amendment.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 182 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 315, Senator Kelly, Vehicle Laws, Bike Lanes and Shoulders, Yielding Right-of-Way, Sarah Debenick, Langenkamp, Memorial Act, favorable, two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill, which passed the Judicial Proceedings Committee unanimously with two amendments, establishes increased penalties for a driver of a vehicle who fails to yield the right-of-way in a designated bike lane or shoulder to a person lawfully riding a bicycle or an electronic personal assistive mobility device or a motor scooter if the violation contributes to the serious injury or death of a person riding that device. The violator would be subject to imprisonment for up to 2 months and a maximum fine of $2,000, which are penalties that appear elsewhere, such as for causing serious injury or death to a cyclist or failing to stop for a pedestrian at a crosswalk. Move the committee amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Senator from District 7 on the...
Mr. President, floor leader, yield for a quick question.
Yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, may proceed.
I appreciate this legislation, support it. I just have a question about, nowadays you have people that are riding those scooters and they're kind of recklessly riding them in and out of sidewalks, cutting in and out. And ironically, yesterday on West Street, I witnessed them. One of them ran in the back of a car because he was tailgating so close, and it was just the reckless driving of the actual scooter rider themselves. I guess this, I'm trying to understand the bill. So if I come to an intersection in a car, I have to stop if I see a bicyclist or a scooter coming to let them pass. What about people, as I said, being recklessly, these kids that are weaving in and out?
I think I understand your question, yeah.
I don't want anybody to be hurt, but I don't want it to be on the driver when it was actually the...
Sure. So this would apply for someone who did not yield the right-of-way in a shoulder or a bicycle lane. So it wouldn't... what you're describing is someone who's recklessly cutting in and out of the roadway. So that's
yes.
not what this applies to.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Orthopedics say that business is going well because of motorized scooters and pickleball. Sort of, yeah, I know. Don't get me wrong, I love the scooters, but yeah, a lot of injuries. All right, any further discussion on the amendments? If not, any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. On the amended report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 315 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 345, Senator Waldstreicher, Transportation Vision Zero Advisory Commission Establishment, favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill establishes the Vision Zero Advisory Commission to advise the Department of Transportation on best practices intended to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on the roadways using a data-driven prevention strategy. There are no committee amendments, Mr. President, but there will be a technical floor amendment. I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. The floor leader has a committee amendment here. The pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. And Senator, just give us just a moment to load this technical amendment into the system. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a technical amendment that alters the mechanism by which members of the commission can be removed. I move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Yes, Senator from the 22nd District has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question on the bill itself.
Question on the bill itself. Senator, will the floor yield for a question?
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question, because this sounds like a really great bill, but we recently had some deaths on roadways in my district, and this bill is really, really important. But I know that Division 0, there's certain roads that are labeled Division 0. Can you just explain what Vision 0 is and what it looks like for us?
So Vision Zero is an aspirational mission statement by which both the state and the counties that we represent who have adopted this create a goal to get to 0 deaths on our roadways. That's 0 deaths for drivers, 0 deaths for pedestrians, 0 deaths for bicyclists, 0 deaths for all road users. And while the likelihood that we actually get to 0 deaths in practice is very low, this creates, I think, a mechanism, a lens by which our state can look at how we design roads so that we can better get to that 0 death goal.
And the purpose of the commission is to provide best practices to the department every year, is that right?
That's exactly right. And so we have a number of these advisory commissions for various departments throughout our state that provide kind of civilian level advice to the departments. They can take that advice or leave that advice, but nonetheless, it allows us to bring together subject matter experts and provide advice to our government agencies.
And the commission itself, is it geographically diverse to make sure it covers the entire state?
It is geographically diverse and subject matter diverse as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further, any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 345 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 402, Senator McKay, Correctional Training Commission membership alterations favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill alters the membership of the Correctional Training Commission by repealing the representative of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, increasing the number of members appointed by the governor who are correctional officers and officers from 4 to 5, repealing the requirement that one of the 4 correctional officers or officers appointed by the governor be a Department of Juvenile Services employee or official, and specifying that the 5 members appointed by the governor must be from local correctional facilities and be represented each by geographical area of the state. There are no committee amendments. It did pass unanimously. I move for the adoption of the favorable report. Thank you.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 402 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 450, Senator Brooks, Baltimore County Speed Monitoring Systems Residential Districts, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 450 authorizes the placement of speed cameras in Baltimore County on highways and residential districts with a maximum speed limit of 35 miles per hour, subject to specified existing signage and placement requirements. The speed camera may not be placed under the bill's authorization in Baltimore County unless Baltimore County Police Department determines the speed camera is necessary based on a traffic safety analysis for the proposed location, which will be conducted by our Baltimore County Department of Public Works. There were 2 amendments. The first was technical, and the second requires that the revenues to be used for traffic calming devices in the county requires the county police department to consider disparate racial and social economic impact when determining where to place a camera, and establishes procedure to ensure citations are properly mailed, as well as a sunset for the bill after 10 years. Mr. President, I move the amended favorable report.
All right, the floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 450 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 504, Senator McKay, Motor Vehicles, Recreational Vehicle Dealer Agreements, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill establishes a new regulatory framework that applies to recreational vehicle manufacturers, distributors, factory branches, and dealers. There are no committee amendments. The bill passed favorably. I've moved that for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 504 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 544, Senator Waldstreicher, Corporations and Associations Ratification of Defective Corporate Acts, alterations, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill alters statutory provisions under the Corporations and Associations article regarding the ratification of defective corporate acts. There are no committee amendments. Mr. President, I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 544 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Do we have more here? One more. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 730, Senator Carter, Motor Vehicles, Motorcycle Passenger Restrictions, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill.
Oh, Senator.
Oh.
Long week.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill prohibits a motorcycle passenger from riding on a seat at a rear of the operator if the passenger cannot position their feet firmly on the footrest while seated, unless the passenger cannot position their feet as required due to a permanent physical disability. There are no committee amendments. The bill was voted unanimously favorable by the committee. I would move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Yes, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Just one question, if I could ask the floor leader.
Will the floor leader yield for a question?
Absolutely.
Senator may proceed.
What is the penalty if someone violates?
A $500 fine, maximum $500 fine.
Is that consistent? What's the penalty for like riding without a helmet? Is it similar to that, or?
Standard traffic citation penalty, I'm told the maximum fine for a misdemeanor is the $500, and there's a prepayment penalty of $80, except for failure to wear protective headgear carries a $110 prepayment penalty. So it's $500.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Maximum.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Any further discussion? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 730 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to JPR calendar number 14. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 7, Senator Bailey, Public Safety Law Enforcement Agencies, Positive Community Feedback, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from District 4 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. SB 7 requires that the Maryland Police Training Commission and Standards Commission to develop a uniform citizen positive community feedback process to be adopted and followed by each law enforcement agency. The process must be simple and posted on the Training Commission's website and on the website of each law enforcement agency that maintains a website. Each law enforcement agency must maintain a record of positive community feedback for all law enforcement officers within the agency. A record of positive community feedback is not considered a personnel record under the Maryland Public Information Act. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, records of positive community feedback are subject to public inspection in accordance with the PIA. There are no committee amendments, so move the adoption of the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 7 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 15, Senator West, Cooperative Housing Cooperations Dispute Settlement, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Here in Maryland, we have very few cooperative housing corporations. There are a couple in the Tuscany, Canterbury section of Baltimore City, and there are a handful scattered around the rest of the state. So this bill alters procedures for the dispute settlement mechanism under the Maryland Cooperative Housing Corporation Act and makes other technical and clarifying changes to the law. There's one amendment which requires a governing body of a co-op to send notices relating to violations by certified mail. There was no opposition to this bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 15 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 34, Senator Carter, Court Jury Service Disqualification, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is favorable with amendments. Amendment number 1 adds bribery of a public employee and bribery of a juror to the list of crimes which disqualify an individual from jury service. Other than that, this bill remains the same as we've passed it 2 or 3 times previously. Just to refresh the body's memory, the bill alters circumstances under which an individual is disqualified from jury service. It seeks to expand jury pools by allowing persons to be eligible to serve on a jury, notwithstanding certain criminal convictions. I would move it was voted unanimously from the committee. I would move the amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 34 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 287, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Department of State Police, Professional Occupations, Application Processes, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This technical and procedural departmental bill changes the licensing and certification process for private detective agencies, private detectives, security guard agencies, security guard system agencies, security systems technicians, railroad police officers, and the commissioning process for special police officers to facilitate an automated application process. It doesn't change the process. It doesn't change the actual requirements. It just changes the process. It makes it automated and streamlined. There are 2 amendments, Mr. President. Amendment number 1 is technical, and amendment number 2 conforms the bill to the House cross file, which is House Bill 172. Mr. President, I move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 287 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 344, Senator Waldstreicher, Criminal and Civil Trespass, Professional Land Surveyors, exception, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill creates a limited exception to our trespass laws for land surveyors while on the job. There are no committee amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 344 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 549, Senator Sidnor, Criminal Procedure, Forensic Genetic Genealogy, DNA Analysis and Search, Applicability for Deceased and Missing Children, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you very much. A few years ago, we were one of the first states in the nation to pass a genetic genealogy bill. Just earlier this year, we were asked if we could relax some of those rules regarding or around deceased and missing children. That's how the bill was presented. During the committee, there was one amendment to actually expand it beyond children so that if you're deceased or if you're a missing individual, the requirements that are in the forensic genealogy bill would not be applicable. So as I mentioned, there were 2 amendments. One was technical. The other one strikes the provision that was limiting applicability to children. With that, I move the 2 amendments in favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 549 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 562, Frederick County Senators, Sheriff of Frederick County Salary Work Group, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from the 4th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 562 establishes the work group to study the salary of the Sheriff of Frederick County. The work group must study the salaries of the sheriff in each county in the state and any other law enforcement position with similar responsibilities and preparation requirements as the sheriff, and make recommendations regarding the salary of the Sheriff of Frederick County. The work group members must elect the chair, the legislative liaison of the county executive of Frederick County, in consultation with the staff of the members of the work group must provide staff. Members may not receive compensation but are entitled to reimbursement for expenses under the standard state travel regulations. By December 15, 2025, the work group must report its findings and recommendations to the Frederick County delegation to the General Assembly. The bill takes effect June 1st, 2024 and terminates December 31st, 2025. There are no committee amendments. Mr. President, so move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 562 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 608, Senator Folden, Public Safety Police Accountability Time Limit for Filing Administrative Charges, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from District 4 is the floor leader.
Last one for the day, Mr. President. As amended, this bill provides for police discipline matters subject to the jurisdiction of an administrative charging committee if an incident involves a member of the public and a police officer. The proofs of review by the investigating unit through disposition by the administrative charging committee shall be completed within 1 year and 1 day after the date of appropriate official employed by the law enforcement agency becomes aware of the incident. The bill also requires a law enforcement agency to file any administrative charges arising out of an investigation of alleged police officer misconduct that is not required to be reviewed by an administrative charging committee within 1 year and 1 day from the date of the appropriate official employed by the law enforcement agency became aware of the incident. However, if the alleged police officer misconduct is related to an activity that reasonably appears to be the subject of a criminal investigation, an administrative charging committee or law enforcement agency must file any administrative charges within 1 year and 1 day of the dates of the specified actions relating to the criminal investigation. There are two committee amendments. The first is technical and adds a sponsor. Amendment number 2 alters the provisions relating to the time for filing administrative charges as specified. I move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 608 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we have report number 15 for judicial proceedings. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 643, Senator Carter, Public Information Act, Surveillance Images, Illegal Dumping in Baltimore City, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thanks, Mr. President. This local bill is a bill as amended. It exempts an employee or agent from the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development from the general prohibition of inspection of a surveillance image of illegal dumping in Baltimore City. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 is described above. The bill was voted unanimously in delegation as well as on the committee. I would move the adoption of the favorable committee report and two amendments.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 643 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 666, Senator Charles, Human Relations, Discrimination by a Place of Public Accommodation, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Don't mind the number, but this bill generally expands the remedies available for discrimination by a place of public accommodation. The bill authorizes a complainant to bring a civil action alleging discrimination by a place of public accommodation under certain circumstances. In addition, the bill authorizes specified parties to elect to have the claims determined in a civil action brought by the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights if certain requirements are met. The bill also repeals a provision that prohibits an administrative law judge from issuing with regard to a respondent found to have engaged in a discriminatory act other than an unlawful employment practice, an order that substantially affects the cost, level, or type of transportation services. Finally, the bill repeals MCCR's authority to seek an order addressing a civil penalty for discrimination by a public place of accommodation. There were two amendments. Amendment number 1 was technical, and amendment number 2 strikes the body of the bill and permits the Maryland Civil Rights Commission to award monetary relief to a complainant if a place of accommodation is adjudicated to have committed a discriminatory act. It allows for escalating award amounts depending on the number of times within a given period the place of accommodation is found to have committed discriminatory acts. It permits an award of monetary relief not to exceed $2,500, provided the act is committed by an agent or employee of the respondent. The maximum amount do not apply to the discriminatory acts if found to be malicious. It further factors that an administrative law judge must consider in determining the amounts of monetary relief. This bill passed the committee unanimously, and I move for a favorable report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 666 is hereby ordered, printed for 3rd reading. We had the jackpot one yesterday. So, it all works. That's it, yes. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 688, Senator Smith, Prince George's County Judgeship, Circuit Courts, favorable.
All right. Chair recognizes the Senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Currently, there are 175 circuit court judges in the state. 24 are in Prince George's County, where they're badly in need of one more judge. So this is just asking for one additional judge. I move favorable on the report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 688 is hereby ordered, printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 827, Senator Smith, Courts and Judicial Proceedings, Jury Examination, favorable of 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill specifies that the purpose of jury examination in all jury trials in any state court must be to, first, identify and remove prospective jurors who are unable to serve fairly and impartially, and 2, to allow parties to obtain information that may provide guidance for the use of preemptory challenges and challenges for cause. Mr. President, there are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical, and amendment number 2 makes clarifying changes to the language and creates a work group to study the voir dire process. Mr. President, I'd move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 827 is hereby ordered, printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 839, Senator Sidnor, General Provisions, Damages or Losses Definition, favorable.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 839 specifies that in statutory causes of action that we created to protect civil rights or consumer rights, damages or losses mean money claimed by or ordered to be paid to a person as compensation for losses of injury resulting from a violation of a person's rights or protections, and includes reasonable nominal damages. There were no committee amendments. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 839 is hereby ordered, printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 965, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Sheriff, salary favorable.
Recognizing the senator from the 42nd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This local bill alters the annual salary of the Carroll County Sheriff by establishing that beginning in 2026, the salary is equal to the salary of a Lieutenant Colonel of the Department of State Police at the highest available step that's in effect on the day prior to the day that the sheriff begins his new term of office. And after that, the salary provisions go up further. So there are no committee amendments. There was no written or oral opposition to the bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 965 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1038, Anne Arundel County Senators, Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission, subpoena enforcement favorable.
Recognizing the senator from Montgomery County's floor leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1038 is a local bill. It passed unanimously. It will grant the Human Relations Committee of Anne Arundel County subpoena authority, which is the same authority granted to the State Human Relations Commission. Move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1038 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, that does it for the. Nope. Clerk, read the next bill. That's not true. It is. That was an unfavorable. All right. Last one for judicial proceedings. Report number 16. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 373, Senator Waldstreicher, criminal law, theft, mail, and mail depository key, favorable of two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The original mail theft bill in Maryland dates to 1713 and hasn't been updated much since. This bill does that updating, establishing that the theft of crime is a violation of 7-104 of criminal law, as well as an act that would constitute a violation under that of the arrow key, which is the key that people use to open up the mail, the blue boxes. It also makes clear that possessing an arrow key with the intent to steal is also disallowed. There are two committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes provisions of the bill and establishes prohibitions related to mail theft, theft of mail using an arrow key, and possession of an arrow key with the intent to steal. Mr. President, I move the favorable committee report and the two committee amendments.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 373 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 400, Senator West, corporations and associations, definitions, emergencies, and outstanding stock revisions, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 42nd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill authorizes a corporation to adopt emergency bylaws and establishes related provisions applicable to a catastrophe or an emergency, as defined in the bill. There are no committee amendments. There was no opposition to the bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 400 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 429, Senator Bailey, corporations and associations, Protestant Episcopal Church, Diocese of Washington, favorable.
Recognizing senator from the 42nd as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an interesting fact that in Maryland, you would think the Diocese of Episcopal Church Diocese of Maryland would cover the state. It doesn't. The Eastern Shore counties are part of the Diocese of Delaware. The Washington, Collier counties in southern Maryland are part of the Diocese of D.C. So the only counties that covered by the Diocese of Maryland are the Central Maryland counties and Western Maryland. This bill relates to the Diocese of D.C. counties. It repeals uncodified provisions of law known as the Maryland Vestry Act, governing the Protestant Episcopal Church Diocese of Washington, and codifies provisions applicable to every religious corporation formed in Maryland by a parish or separate congregation that is in union with or intending to apply for union with the General Convention of the Protestant Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Washington. There are no committee amendments. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Oh, what was that? Okay. Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th District on the report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the floor leader.
Will the floor leader yield?
I'll try.
Senator may proceed.
Yeah.
I
No.
noticed the sponsor of this bill absented himself from the floor for this conversation.
Oh, really? So I try to keep an eye on interesting things that flows through this body, and this is very interesting and different bill. I've never seen one like this before, dealing with we setting the rules for a religious organization. And the bill goes back, way back to 1700s, quoting statutes from 1700s. And I'm just curious, why do we need to do this? And if you go in the bill, let me go back here. Page 3, it talks about the bylaws of a religious institution may be adopted by a majority of the qualified voters voting at a regular and special congregational meeting called for that purpose. And talking about also each religious corporation subject to this part is subject at all times to the Constitution and canons of the Convention of the Protestant Episcopal Church. Why are we legislating church meetings and church votes? And
Thank you
this
very
is
much for that incisive-
awfully curious to know.
Thank you for that question. The fact is that the Episcopal Church used to be the Church of England, which was the official church of the colony of Maryland. So the organization of the church was part of the state back in those days. And so as the current Episcopal Church became the Episcopal Church when the Revolution occurred, and we decided we didn't want to be part of the Church of England anymore. So they renamed the church the Protestant Episcopal Church, the Church of Maryland. But the provisions governing the law of that church remain in Maryland law, unlike many other congregations which aren't part of Maryland law. So the language you referred to on page 3 only applies to the Diocese of D.C. That covers Montgomery, Prince George's County, Charles County, and St. Mary's County. Right. The other two dioceses of Maryland already require each of their congregations to have their own bylaws, but to ultimately be governed by the entire diocese of that diocese. In the D.C. diocese, there has never been a requirement until this time that the individual congregations have their own bylaws. So this just brings the Washington, D.C. diocese up to the same level as the Maryland diocese and the Delaware diocese, so that in every county in the state, the Episcopal Church congregation will have to have its own bylaws, but will have to operate under the overall umbrella of that diocese.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that for those who did not read the bill, as you basically cover the bill. And it goes back to my initial question. Why are we now in 2024 still governing a religious institution in Maryland? I mean, if we free the slaves, right? Why
Yes.
don't we free the church instead of us legislating church meetings and stuff like that? We have enough to do. I have a
Fortunately,
purple
in-
alert bill in your committee that's still sitting there, but here we are legislating the church.
What can I
and
say?
in a country that is built on freedom of religion.
Senator, just if we could keep it on the bill at hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Well, I guess the answer is because we always have, and rather than repeal all the existing law that's in statute and try to tell the Episcopal Church to start from scratch, we're building on what's there in a very modest way in this bill.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's a deeper issue. I don't think we can solve it with this bill, but it's very troubling, especially even when we talk about protections and freedoms. We're still dealing with things that our Constitution separates. We no longer have an official church in Maryland, or do we?
No, this is not the official Church of Maryland.
So why are we
But this church
mandated?
still has its operations governed by statute, rather than many of the other denominations in the state, which govern their own operations without the statute being involved.
I understand that. It's obvious because the bill is before us. So, Mr. President, could we lay this over and I can think about
It
this?
would be a special order on this one because we don't have an amendment before us.
Okay, could we special order this bill, Mr. President?
Sure, till tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Well, till maybe April 19th.
If
I would resist that,
Okay,
Mr.
let's
President.
till tomorrow.
Yes, Mr.
Is
President,
that-
till
For now,
tomorrow.
we'll get some more information and
Yeah.
see where we are tomorrow.
Yeah, thank
with
you.
it. Is it-
Thank you.
Any objections? Without objection, the bill will be special ordered at the appropriate time
you, Mr.
tomorrow.
President.
All right, clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 439, Senator Elfrith, Family Law Victims of Domestic Violence Program Certification and Grant Fund, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. This bill establishes the Victims of Domestic Violence Program Grant Fund, which is a special fund to be administered by the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. It will provide grants to public or private, nonprofit, comprehensive domestic violence programs that are certified by the federally recognized State Domestic Violence Coalition. The governor may include in the budget an annual appropriation of $5 million for the fund. The bill further requires that the domestic violence programs as established under the existing statute be certified by the federally recognized State Domestic Violence Coalition as a comprehensive domestic violence program. There were no amendments and the bill passed unanimously. Move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Do we have an amendment? Senator has an amendment? Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Looks like a complicated one. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is an amendment that adds sponsorship, and we have worked with the sponsor of the bill as well as the floor leader. Hopefully, this is a friendly amendment.
All right, let's hear from the floor leader. Senators move the amendment.
Very friendly, thank you.
Very friendly, all right. Any objections from the floor? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Clerk, any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 439 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 518, Senator A. Washington, Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity Alterations, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 518, this bill extends the termination date of Chapter 654 of 2022, which established a task force on property appraisal and valuation equity from June 30, 2024 to December 31, 2024. The bill also extends the date by which the required report is to be submitted from October 31, 2023 to October 31, 2024. The bill takes effect June 1, 2024. There have been no amendments, and the bill moved favorably. I ask for a favorable report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Tongue-tied. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 518 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 652, Senator McCray, Department of Juvenile Services Report on Shootings, Department of Juvenile Services Transparency Act of 2024, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've often had conversations this session about the multi-pronged approach of how we deal with juvenile justice, and this bill is a critical part of that. So as amended, this bill requires the Department of Juvenile Services to report to the Commission on Juvenile Justice Reform and Emerging and Best Practices and the General Assembly on December 1st of each year on the number of juveniles under the department's supervision in the preceding year who were non-fatally shot, shot another individual, or were victims of a homicide. 2, the actions that the department took in response and the timeline of such actions. And then 3, the age of each juvenile in the report and the county of residence of each juvenile in the report. Mr. President, there are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical, and amendment number 2 requires the report to be sent to the commission. I'd move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 652 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 873, Senator McKay, Courts Immunity from Liability, Maryland Safe Haven Program, favorable.
All right. Bill sponsor? Senator from District 1 recognized as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill extends from 10 to 60 days after birth of a newborn the time frame during which a person can leave an unharmed newborn with the responsible adult without the intent to return for the newborn, without being subject to civil liability or criminal prosecution. A person is also authorized to leave an unharmed newborn in a designated facility. The bill authorizes a designated facility to receive a newborn and a newborn safety device as specified. Subject to existing funding, the Secretary of Human Services must develop, implement, and maintain a public information program about Maryland Safe Haven Program by December 31st, 2025, and annually thereafter. The Secretary must provide a report to the General Assembly on the program's metrics as specified. There are no committee reports. The committee recommended favorable unanimously. I move that the adoption of the favorable committee report be accepted.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 873 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1067, Senator West, Baltimore County, Speed Monitoring Systems, Interstate 695, favorable, 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is sponsored by 7 of the 8 Baltimore County state senators. As amended, the bill authorizes the State Highway Administration to place up to 16 speed cameras on the portion of the Baltimore Beltway that lies in Baltimore County, subject to existing signage and placement requirements for speed cameras. However, only 4 cameras may be operated at any given time. The bill also requires a real-time display of a driver's traveling speed, so a driver approaching a camera will know that he's driving too fast. The fines collected as a result of violations enforced by these speed cameras will be used solely to assist in covering the cost of roadway and safety improvements on the Beltway. During the first 90 days of operation, a warning notice rather than a citation must be issued for any recorded violations, and the bill terminates in June 2029. There are 2 committee amendments. One is technical. The second transfers authority to place and operate the speed cameras from Baltimore County to the State Highway Administration. There was no written or oral opposition to this bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the 2 amendments as well as the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion on the amendments? Any objections to the amendments? Without objection, the committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1067 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. The chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Between calendars, I just wanted to take a quick moment and introduce my friend, Michelle Potter. Michelle is Executive Director of Asbury Methodist Village in District 17. That is an active, wonderful, environmental, nonprofit community. Before that, she worked for the city of Gaithersburg for 20 years and did parks and rec and community activities. And she's a marathon runner and a dog lover and all cool things. And it's just a joy to have her with us today. Please welcome Michelle Potter.
Welcome, Ms. Potter. Welcome. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we'll go kind of opposite. Oh, yes, Senator from Montgomery County.
So sorry. I know we're very busy today, but since we are between calendars and we're introducing people, I would like to introduce a lovely young woman who I gave birth to, who is here visiting today on spring break, my daughter, Maeve. You met her when she's 6, and now she's 20.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Great to see you. Great to see you. Hope you're enjoying your spring break. Good. Just where you wanted to be, right? Exactly. Excellent, excellent. All right, let's go ahead and we'll go down the road the other way. So we'll go to B&T. We've got calendar number 8. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 14, Senator Jackson, Economic Development, Tourism Zones, Designation, and Benefits, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from 27th District as the floor leader.
47.
I was trying to decide which one to go, and safest to go with 27.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 14 as amended authorizes counties and municipalities in one designate specified tourism zones, exempt the gross receipts from any admissions and amusement charge levied by qualifying tourism enterprise in a tourism zone from admissions and amusement taxes. And 3, grant property tax credits against county and municipal real and personal property taxes to qualified tourism enterprises located in a tourism zone. There were 2 committee amendments. The first is technical. The second adds authorization to counties instead of just municipalities. It also adds the date the zone will expire to the information to be provided to the comptroller. Finally, the amendment makes clear that the local government cannot provide an admissions and amusement tax exemption from those charged by the Maryland Stadium Authority or the state A&A tax for electronic instant bingo. So with that, Mr. President, move the adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 14 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 370, Senator Heddleman, Community Schools, Rental Assistance for Community School Families Program and Fund Establishment, favorable with 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 370 is building on a program that we created a number of years ago through the Blueprint. We designated certain at-risk communities, high poverty areas, and designated the schools there as community schools, and we decided to provide the students in those schools with targeted services, things like childcare, things like tutoring, things like transportation and wraparound services and mental health supports. One thing we did not do is provide them with rental assistance, and one thing that we also know is that housing stability is incredibly, incredibly important to a child's education. So that is the background behind Senate Bill 370. This bill will create a rental assistance for community school family program to provide rental assistance to eligible student households at community schools. As amended, the Department of Housing and Community Development will administer the program with the Director of Community Schools, and MSDE will support it. There are 3 committee amendments. The first is technical. The second switches the administration of the program from MSDE to DHCD. They have a lot of expertise in this area, having administered ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, during COVID, and they are gung-ho about doing it. It alters the eligibility criteria and adds a use of the grants. The third amendment authorizes instead of requires an annual appropriation for the program. I move adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 370 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 446, Senator Muse, Local Government, Condominium, and Homeowners Associations Repair and Rehabilitation Funds, favorable.
Recognizing Vice Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are about 1 million Marylanders who live in condominiums or community associations, of which there are about 7,100 in Maryland. And as you know, some of them require the repair and rehabilitation of the common facilities, like the road, like the sewer system, from the association. Some don't. Over the years, many of these have needed improvements. But some associations have the resources and some don't. So what this bill does is only authorizes municipalities and counties to set up special funds to help with rehabilitation of common services in community associations. There are no amendments, and the vote in committee was unanimous. Move the report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 446 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Education, Energy, and the Environment. Report number 23. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 448, Senator Muse, Commission to Study African American Civil War Soldiers in Maryland, favorable to amendments.
All right. Senator from District 10, recognized as the floor leader.
Thanks, Mr. President. Senate Bill 448 establishes the Commission to Study African American Civil War Soldiers in Maryland. The Commission must study the history of African American Civil War soldiers who fought for the Union Army in Maryland, including muster rolls, location of services, and all distinguished honors and recognitions awarded, and to make findings and recommendations regarding the funding, design, construction, and location of an appropriate memorial dedicated to African American Civil War soldiers in Maryland. The Maryland State Archives must staff the Commission. By December 1, 2024, the Commission must report its findings and recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly. The bill takes effect July 1, 2024, and terminates June 30, 2025. There are two committee amendments. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 strikes the Commission and requires the Department of Veteran Affairs to conduct a study on the history of African American Civil War soldiers and make recommendations on funding, design, constructions, and location of an appropriate memorial. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any objections? If not, the amended report is adopted. Chair recognizes the vice chair of the committee appears to have an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Pages will collect and distribute the amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. As this bill was introduced, it talked about the Commission coming up with an appropriate monument or memorial, and this would leave the concept of multiple in different places around the state. Move the amendment.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the amendment. I'm sorry. The maker of the amendment has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thanks, Mr. President, and I'd like to thank the Vice Chair for her the amendment, and I consider this a favorable amendment.
Wonderful.
I'd like to move.
All right. Any objections from the floor on the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 448 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 775, the President, state officers, and employees require surety bonds, insurance policies authorized, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from the 23rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill repeals provisions under the state government article pertaining to the Maryland State Employees Surety Bond Committee and transfers specified duties of the committee to the state treasurer. The bill also authorized specified officers and employees of the state who are required to be covered by surety bonds to alternatively be covered by insurance policies of the type and in the amount of coverage determined by the state treasurer. The bill takes effect June 1st, 2024. There are no committee amendments. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 775 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 810, Senator Mounts, Dorchester County Property Leases Notice Exemptions, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 38th District as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 810 is a local bill. It authorizes Dorchester County to enter into a lease of county property without giving notice as specified if the lease has a term of 5 years or less. These type of leases will be placed on an open session meeting agenda for the county council's review and consideration to provide the public with ample opportunity for comment. There are no committee amendments. I move for a favorable report for SB 810.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 810 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 982, Senator Hester, Information Technology, Modernization of Information Technology Products, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to provide a bit of context on this fabulous bill. In 2021, we did a study that looked at state IT systems. We found that 46% of them were so old they couldn't be updated. And so we then created in 2022 the Modernize Maryland Commission. And this commission worked really diligently over the past year to ensure that we were looking at appropriate IT investments and taking advantage of the funding that was available. And at the end of this last year, they produced a report with 20 recommendations, which was unanimous. And so this bill started with those recommendations. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank the staff of that commission and everybody who served on it. So basically, at a very high level, what the commission recommended was that we modernize our investment process to be quicker with our investments and take them out of the annual budget cycle, and that we have a structured process for accountability, and that we use any increased efficiencies to pay back into the fund. At the same time, we had 2 departmental bills that came in this year, and so I'd like to thank Vicki Gruber for working to combine these 3 bills. She did an amazing job, and everybody who's served on that mini working group. So with all that said, what Senate Bill 982 does, now as amended, it makes a few changes to the state's governance, oversight, and management of information technology. It requires the Secretary of IT to have a state modernization plan and an IT centralization study. It creates the Technology Investment Fund, and it takes a closer look at assessing how we can improve the procurement process. Mr. President, there are 2 committee amendments. The first one makes technical changes and adds co-sponsors. The second one establishes that it's the intent of the General Assembly to, for information technology projects to be vested in the Department of Information Technology. It increases the threshold from $1 to $5 million for projects that are considered major IT development projects. It removes the requirement that funding is provided over and above the DoIT's budget, which actually was a drafting error. It grants contracts for information technology modernization to receive an expedited view from the Board of Public Works. It requires an assessment of legacy systems. It allows the delegation and oversight over other projects in another executive branch agency in certain cases. It requires the department to develop a process for prioritizing and modernizing projects. It modifies the membership and purpose of the Modernize Maryland Commission, and it adds 2 pins to help with the process. And I also wanted to thank the Department of IT, in particular Secretary Savage, for her help in coming to the table to get this consensus bill together. And so with that, Mr. President, I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Yes, it looks like the floor leader has an amendment. The pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is a simple amendment that came after
Senator, give us just 1 second really quickly here. Let's get it up on the board first. Oh, okay, we got it. Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this just asks that in the interest of fiscal responsibility, that we do an assessment to look at how the Technology Investment Fund can assist the state with local fiber and broadband projects, and asks for an evaluation to be reported back to us. And hopefully this will save us extra money that can be put back into the fund, Mr. President.
All right.
I move the...
Senator moves the amendment. Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 982 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go to, yes, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Can we stop just for a second here for an introduction?
Certainly.
We have the family of former Senator Douglas J.J. Peters in the gallery, and I'd like to give them a special welcome this morning. There's James, Doug's son, Becky, his daughter-in-law, Russell, and Tommy. Welcome to the Senate.
It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you all are doing all right. We think about you often. Thank you. All right.
Mr. President?
Yes, Senator from the 38th District.
Before we go to the next
Please.
calendar, I just wanted to also mention, because I'm so excited that the Peters family are my constituents. They moved down from Prince George's down to the Worcester County. And I also wanted to give them credit because they've been working all morning. They've been running around to the different House and Senate offices. And when we go back to our offices, we should have our new socks, my favorite socks, for upcoming World Down Syndrome Day on March 21st. So they've been working hard, so it's great to see them that they were able to stop and visit us before they go back to Maryland's coast.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that, Senator. And thanks for the advocacy. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let's stick with education, energy, and the environment. We've got one more report, number 24. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 395, Senator Augustine, Higher Education Credit Eligibility, Transfer of Credits, English as a Second Language Courses, Credit for All Language Learning, Call Act. Favorable to amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill requires English as a second language or English language learner courses taken at a public community college, if those courses are not classified as remedial by that community college, to transfer to any institution of higher education in the state as specified. An institution of higher education in the state may not deny the transfer of such credits for any reason. The public community college must consider a course or program for ESL or English language learner as eligible for either world language or humanities elective credit, or both, toward a student's associate's degree if the course is not classified as remedial course. There are, in fact, two committee amendments. The first is technical. The second provides that specified language courses earned at a community college may be transferable to any private nonprofit institution of higher education in the state, and that the institution must review and consider the transfer of these credits. There is no fiscal impact. I move adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill, further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 395 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 557, Senator Augustine, Election Law, Polling Place Procedures, Individual Assisting a Voter. Favorable to amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill prohibits an individual assisting a voter in marking or preparing a ballot at a polling place or early voting center from assisting more than 3 voters who are unrelated to the individual in marking or preparing a ballot, or 2, receiving compensation for assisting a voter in marking or preparing the ballot. The bill takes effect January 1st, 2025. There are 2 amendments. The first is technical. The second amendment clarifies that the prohibition does not apply to election judges. There is no fiscal impact. I move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection? Oh, yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County on the amendments.
I had a question for the floor leader.
Will the floor yield?
Yep.
Senator may proceed.
Would you mind explaining why we are doing this? Did something happen?
Yes. There was a situation where an individual was, in essence, bringing multiple folks up into a voting time after time, indicating that the persons did not or would require additional assistance, and in essence was just multiply voting over and over again.
What does assist mean?
Excuse me?
What does assist mean?
Assist means that the individual, if the person does require assistance, the assisting individual is allowed to come into the actual voting location to provide assistance and can in fact basically help the person to vote in the actual process of voting. So it's all the way in there versus having an election judge who can also provide that support. This is a third party person who is able to do that.
Okay, so this in no way would affect, like with my fraternity having this voteless people for hopeless people, this wouldn't affect some of the work that they may do to try to help voters?
No, so this has nothing to do with helping people to get them to the polls or anything at all to do with that. This has to do with the actual act of voting itself inside of the polling place where you have physically gone in and you are actually right there standing with them. In this instance, it was an individual who came out with multiple I voted stickers on their shirt because they in essence had voted multiple times.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. On the amendments, any further discussion? Any objection to the committee amendments? Without objection, the committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 557 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 771, Senator M. Washington, Education Initial Teacher Certification Requirements, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 771 creates more options and pathways to allow aspiring educators to join our schools and how to give some flexibility about how to best showcase their competency while at the same time maintaining our high standards. The committee has been advised that there are 4 basic components that lead to the initial teacher certification.
Excuse me, Senator, just one moment. It's just getting a little loud. If we could take discussions off the floor, please, so we can pay attention to the center. Senator, may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while I just want to caution you, I'm going to tell you the 4 basic components. They are reflected in the law, but they're not necessarily in the order that I'm going to discuss them. So first, there is a basic academic competency, right? And so again, when you're entering into a program, we want to ensure that you have basic skills. And so there are a number of different ways to demonstrate that. The second thing that we look at and require for our teacher programs is that the teachers have specific examinations in a content area. And then third, there's this other process called induction that basically makes sure that they can teach. Okay, so the changes, or what we've done, what the bill does, is that it adds 3 different ways that a teacher or someone that wishes to be initially certified can demonstrate that they have basic competency. So 1, they have to pass a literacy test that's approved by the department, 6-21. They have to hold a degree from a regionally recognized institution, or they can submit documentation from their evaluations from their existing schools. Additionally, we wanted to ensure so there are two
two committee amendments. The first amendment is technical. The second one adds the words rigorous to the literacy exam. I ask for the adoption of the committee report and a favorable adoption of the two amendments and a favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from Prince George's on the amendments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Could the floor leader
Will the floor
yield?
leader yield? Senator
Could
may
you
proceed.
please tell me who supported Senate Bill 771?
Oh, the bill passed unanimously by the committee, but you're asking, I believe you're asking, so this is
Testified in
all,
support.
right. So the amendments that are in this bill have been agreed to by all the parties. So from the unions to the state board to the superintendent and the AIB, it took a lot of work, and the House. So you can imagine all of this together to produce what we have before you.
I just wanted to know if MSCA had,
Yes,
did
so
they
the
participate in
MSCA,
discussion?
yes, MSCA, MSDE, the state board, AIB, LMNOP. Yes, everybody's here.
Thank you
This
very
bill.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Question remains on the amendments. Any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 771 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1022, Senator King, Maryland Higher Education Commission Academic Program Approval and Institution Mission Statements Requirements, favorable to amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 23rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, let me take a moment to provide some background and information on this important bill. Recall in 2006, the state of Maryland was a defendant in a 15-year-long federal lawsuit, the Coalition of Equity and Excellence in Education in Maryland Higher Education versus the Maryland Higher Education Commission, hereafter known as MHEC. When that case was finally resolved, it resulted in a $577 million settlement over a 10-year period for our state's 4 HBCUs related to unnecessary program duplication. Colleagues, our goal is to ensure this never happens again and to ensure that Maryland can develop and maintain a nationally recognized and interdependent system of post-secondary education consisting of a network of colleges, universities, and centers offering complementary undergraduate and graduate instructional programs, research, and outreach to a racially and demographically diverse population as distinguished for its quality, economy, and efficiency, affordability, and accessibility. This resulted in a program approval process workshop. The workshop was co-chaired by our great senator from the 39th District and consisted of both senators, delegates, or representatives from the Center for Civil Rights and Education, University of Maryland, the Maryland Independent Colleges and University Association, and the Secretary of MHEC. 5 meetings were held from September to December with the goal of evaluating, streamlining, improving, and making recommendations on MHEC's policies, practices with respect to academic program review, enhancing the economic competitiveness of the state by ensuring responsiveness of institutions of higher education to market demand, and effectively support the state's workforce development requirements. What does the bill do? Colleagues, the bill requires the collection of state and regional workforce needs data, sets new requirements for the state plan for higher education, and requires the 2022 plan to be updated. Requires MHEC to establish a program review process advisory council. Requires MHEC to establish regulations regarding the program approval process. Establishes requirements related to review hearings and requires MHEC to write a procedural guide. Requires MHEC to conduct a quadrennial review of academic programs that were approved as specified to determine whether an historically black college or university that objected to the program was demonstrably harmed. Requires each public institution of higher education to submit a letter of intent to MHEC that identifies each new graduate level program that an institution intends to propose for approval. Establishes the proposed program's collaboration grant fund. requires establishment of a new separate process for approval for online-only programs offered to out-of-state students, requires institutional mission statements to undergo more robust review and approval, and requires MHEC to conduct a review of the academic program review process. There were 2 committee amendments. The first is technical. Amendment number 2 clarifies that an individual employed by the Department of Commerce must work collaboratively with the Department of Labor and MHEC on workforce need data as specified, clarifies that MHEC must incorporate the goals and priorities for higher education into the state plan for higher education for all public institutions of higher education, not just previously specified, provides that in reviewing proposals for new academic program proposals, the Secretary and Commission must consider whether the program is unnecessarily duplicative, as well as whether it's unreasonably duplicative, and adopt regulations establishing specific standards for unnecessary duplication. Revises program approval process harm standard to repeal demonstrable and provide that harm must inure to the state or students attending institutions of higher education in the state. Requires the Commission to adopt certain regulations in consultation with the Attorney General instead of jointly. Requires the Commission to conduct a certain review annually versus every 4 years, and adds clarifying language authorizing objections to be filed as part of the review process for new proposed programs that are offered only online and to a majority of out-of-state students, and that enable competition with out-of-state competitors. Fiscal impact is minimal, and I move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1022 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Let's go to the Committee on Finance. Report number 21. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 216, Chair, Finance Committee, Workers' Compensation Failure to Insure Penalties, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you saved the best to last here. As amended, Senate Bill 216 is a departmental bill that increases from $10,000 to $25,000 the maximum penalty that an employer must pay to the uninsured employers fund when the Workers' Compensation Commission finds that the employer failed to provide workers' compensation coverage for the employees or failed to comply with an order from the Commission. Amendment number 1 authorizes the Commission to assess a penalty of up to $25,000 rather than mandating the penalty be $25,000. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 216 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 234, Chair, Finance Committee, Unemployment Insurance Work Search Requirement Exemption for Federal Civilian Employees during a federal government shutdown, favorable.
Recognize the Senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 234 is a departmental bill that authorizes the Secretary of Labor to exempt a federal civilian employee who has been furloughed from the requirement to be actively seeking work for unemployment insurance benefits eligibility if, during the furlough, the employee remains able to work, available for work, and work attached. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor Leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 234 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 476, the President, Workman's Comp, Occupational Disease Presumptions, First Responders Caring for Public Employees in the Safety Professions, CAPES Act, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 476 is an administration bill. It establishes additional occupational diseases presumptions for specified public safety employees, generally firefighters, who contract thyroid, colon, or ovarian cancer. The amendment adds sponsors. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 476 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 830, Senator Klossmeyer, Radiation Therapy, Radiography, Nuclear Medicine Technology, and Radiology Assistance, Limited License Radiology Technologist, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. As amended, Senate Bill 830 establishes a licensure exception to allow individuals to perform limited x-rays of the chest, extremities, and spine under the supervision of a physician or a radiologic technology in physician offices. Individuals authorized to perform x-rays under the bill must register with the Board of Physicians and comply with the specified education, experience, training, examination, and continuing education requirements. The bill includes civil penalty provisions and authorizes the board to adopt regulations implementing the bill's requirements. The bill is effective January 1st, 2025, and sunsets after 5 years. Amendment number 1 makes changes to the bill's title, purpose, and function paragraphs. Amendment number 2 strikes the bill as introduced and substitute the bill as described. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 830 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 846, Senator Klossmeyer, Maryland Department of Labor Unemployment Insurance Study on Actively Seeking Work Requirements, favorable.
Recognizing the vice chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 846 requires the Department of Labor to conduct a study in the actively seeking work requirements of an unemployment insurance system in the state and other states to evaluate the effects of ghosting on those requirements. Ghost means the failure of a claimant for UI benefits who is scheduled for a job interview with an employer to attend the interview or maintain contact with the employer after the interview is scheduled. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 846 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Finance Committee report number 22. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 156, Senator Salling, Port of Baltimore, renaming, favorable, one amendment.
Recognizing chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 156 codifies in statute the name of the Port of Baltimore as the Helen Delage Bentley Port of Baltimore. Originally, it was an executive order, so now it'll be codified. The amendment adds sponsors. There's no physical impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 156 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 595, Senator Hershey, Health Benefit Plans, Calculation of Cost Sharing, Contributions, Requirements, and Prohibitions, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognizing the minority whip as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 595 requires that an administrator, carrier, or pharmacy benefit manager, when calculating an enrollee or beneficiary's contribution to an applicable cost-sharing requirement, such as a deductible under a health plan, to include any payments that are made by or on behalf of the enrollee or beneficiary, such as a copay assistance program. An administrator, carrier, or PBM may not directly or indirectly set, alter, implement, or condition the terms of health plan coverage based on information about the availability or amount of financial or product assistance that's available for a prescription drug. The bill also makes definitional changes to statutory provisions that govern PBMs and applies a certain annual limitation on cost sharing under the Affordable Care Act to all plans offered or issued by an administrator or carrier in the state. Mr. President, Amendment number 1 makes changes to the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 for prescription drugs and biological products applies the requirements of the bill only in circumstances when there is no generic equivalent or interchangeable product, or if there is an alternative, the patient has obtained access to the brand drug through a prior authorization, step therapy protocol, or exception or appeal process. So I would move the amendments, Mr. President, and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 595 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 742, Anne Arundel County Senators, Anne Arundel County Alcoholic Beverages Fees for Class C per diem licenses, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 742 in Anne Arundel County increases the fees for specified Class C per diem alcoholic beverages licenses when issued for one-day events with more than 1,000 attendees. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 742 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 760, Senator Kramer, Consumer Protection Retail Sales of Gift Cards, Gift Card Scams Prevention Act of 2024, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 760 establishes consumer protections relating to the retail sale of gift cards. Under the bill, a merchant may not sell a gift card unless the card is packaged in a way that protects against tampering and the merchant displays a notice that cautions consumers about gift card scams. The bill also requires merchants to train employees on how to identify and respond to gift card fraud. Amendment 1 makes its changes to the title of the bill. Amendment 2 prohibits a merchant from knowingly selling a gift card in a manner that violates the bill. In addition, the amendment strikes a requirement that merchants register with the Consumer Protection Division, alters notice and packaging requirements under the bill, and establishes distinct packaging requirements and implementation timelines. The amendment also establishes record-keeping requirements for third-party card resellers and enforcement provisions under the bill, including striking a private right of action. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report. The bill passed unanimously in committee.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 760 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 778, Senator Gallion, Health Insurance Hearing Aids for Adults Coverage, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognizing the senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 778 requires health insurance carriers to provide coverage for all medically appropriate and necessary hearing aids for an adult covered under a policy or contract. The amendment specifies that the coverage will be provided if the hearing aids are prescribed, fitted, and dispensed by a licensed audiologist. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 778 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Senators, I'm very pleased today to have the opportunity. We have a very, very special guest who is joining us all the way from Ireland. We had the opportunity to spend some time in Portugal this summer or in the fall to learn about a number of different features. Senator Mark Daly is the 24th chair of the Senate of Ireland. And interestingly, he was also one of the youngest members elected to the 23rd Senate of Ireland in 2007. But hopefully you all have a chance to get to meet with him and talk. He grew up in Northern Ireland. It's Derry, right? Is it Derry? Kerry, right, not Derry, right. That was close, right? It was in the close realm. But just some amazing, remarkable stories about the experience of growing up in Northern Ireland and that impact and how Ireland has changed so dramatically. It's truly, truly incredible. And a good friend and colleague, and just want to say thank you for joining us here today. We're honored by your presence. Thank you. And actually, this is a bit unscheduled, but if there's anything you'd like to pass along from the Senate of Ireland, would you like to join me up here and say hello on behalf of all of Ireland?
Thank you so much.
Oh, my honor.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
please.
Well, as it's St. Patrick's season, not St. Patrick's Day, it's a great honor to be here. I suppose the connections between Ireland and the United States are long and enduring. Symbolized in our national flag, which was created by a guy named Thomas Francis Meagher, and he had an extraordinary life by any measure. Not only did he create our national flag, talking about its meaning of peace between Catholics and Protestants, that was on the 7th of March 1848, but then he decided to take a career path of leading a rebellion in Ireland, which did not go well, because he ended up on trial for high treason. And then the judge asked him, after finding him guilty of high treason, had he anything to say in his own defense? And he said, "Well, Your Honor, I give you my word as a gentleman. If you do not sentence me to death, I will try again." So Thomas Francis Meagher was the last man in Ireland to be sentenced to be hung, drawn and quartered, but it got commuted for transportation for life to Australia. And then he escaped from Australia and made his way to America. With the help of Irish America, they hired a ship, went to Australia and brought him to New York. And then when the Civil War broke out, he joined the 69th Regiment of the Union Army in the American Civil War, became a brigadier general, led them in the Battle of Fredericksburg and Antietam. And as you know, you can get praise from your friends, but getting praise from your enemy is truly the highest form of praise. Robert E. Lee overlooked the attack of the Irish Brigade on his own forces in the Battle of Fredericksburg. And he talked of the attack of the Irish Brigade. He said, "Never were men so brave. They ennobled their race by their splendid gallantry on that desperate occasion." They attacked with 1,200. They came back with 283. Meagher, not a man to follow the chain of command, was afraid that his regiment would be incorporated into another regiment, went up to the White House, knocked on the door, and asked to see President Lincoln. And he was let into the White House, and President Lincoln said, "What do you want?" "I want to reform the Irish Brigade." And Lincoln signed the order. And he became a friend of Abraham Lincoln. He was at Paul Bert Lincoln's funeral, and he ended up being appointed as the governor of Montana. And befitting a man who had an extraordinary life, he had an extraordinary death. He was in a paddle boat in the Missouri River, and the following day he was gone, never seen again, dead at 43. All that in one lifetime. So the creator of our national flag ended up as a legislator like you and like you all. So that is one of the connections. But one of the other connections is my ancestor was General Sullivan with George Washington in the crossing of the Delaware. And Washington is reported to have said, when things were not going so well in the search for American independence, he said, "Who were the strangers among us who first mustered to our staff? O Ireland's generous sons, O friend of our country in our most friendless days." So in 2026, when we celebrate American independence, we look forward to celebrating the long and enduring links between our two republics. Thank you for this great honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
And are you able to stay? I know All right, excellent, wonderful. As you can tell, this was an unprompted, unscheduled, so you can imagine the stories that were regaled as we were traveling through and seeing the castles of Portugal and learning about substance abuse treatment and all the, such a wealth of knowledge, and such a wonderful public servant. Thank you for joining us here today. All right, we have one additional report here, second reader report, so let's jump into it. We're getting close. This is report number 23. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 332, Senator Lewis Young, Hospitals and Urgent Care Centers Sepsis Protocol, Lauchlin's Law, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the senator from the 37th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 332, as amended, requires each hospital and urgent care center in the state by January 1, 2025 to implement an evidence-based protocol for the early recognition and treatment of a patient with the various types of sepsis. The protocol developed by hospitals must comply with CDC and other guidelines, and specialty psychiatric hospitals must establish a screening process for sepsis. There are periodic training requirements regarding the sepsis protocols for hospital and urgent care staff, and update training requirements if sepsis protocols are changed. The amendment alters the bill as just described. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 332 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 469, Senator McCray, Maryland Cannabis Administration Cannabis Licensing Protest of Renewal, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 469 authorizes at least 10 individuals who are residents or commercial tenants located within 1,000 feet of a licensed cannabis business to lodge a protest with the Cannabis Administration regarding the renewal of the license. The protest must be filed at least 30 days before the license expires, and the administration cannot approve the renewal without holding a hearing, unless the administration finds that the basis of the protest filed against the renewal lacks substance. The basis for a protest are detailed in the bill and include violations of law, regulations, conduct by a licensee that creates or maintains conditions that allow other individuals to act in a manner that disturbs the public peace. The process is similar to existing provisions regarding alcoholic beverage licensees. There are no amendments. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 469 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 478, the President Families Serve Act of 2024, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 28th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, Senate Bill 478 is an administration bill put forward that authorizes state agencies to give a hiring preference to spouses of active duty service members. We have hundreds of thousands of active duty members in Maryland, being close to Washington, D.C., and all our military establishments, and we have a shortage of workers in our state workforce. So this is an ideal bill at an ideal time. On February 29th, in the bill hearing, we were honored to have our own First Lady, Dawn Moore, come to testify for this bill. She is a military spouse. We also had our distinguished Lieutenant Governor, Rhona Miller, come to testify on the bill. She's a military spouse. So I appreciate them looking out for other military spouses and a tremendous asset to the state of Maryland. I just want to add that we made the bill even better that came before us. We made sure all the members of the uniformed services were eligible for this. And we talked about this earlier a few weeks ago. The uniformed services include the folks we know in the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, etc. Also include thousands who serve in the Public Health Service and the National Oceanic Administration. So this is a great bill. It passed the committee unanimously. There are two amendments. Amendment 1 adds sponsors and technical changes. Amendment 2, I mentioned earlier, made sure it covered all the members of the uniformed services. There was absolutely no opposition at the committee hearing. Therefore, Mr. President, I move the amendments and the adoption of the very favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 478 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 623, Senator Carter, Prison Education Delivery Reform Commission, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the senator from the 40th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 623 establishes a 2-year Prison Education Delivery Reform Commission. The commission must convene an advisory stakeholder group and work with the advisory stakeholder group, develop an educational focused statewide framework of policies to invest in strategies to increase public safety and reduce recidivism of adult offenders. Research best practices regarding the education of those who are subject to the criminal and juvenile justice systems, identifying measures to mitigate risk factors that contribute to the adult contact with the criminal justice system, and request technical assistance from identified organizations. The amendments add members to the commission and an additional duty. There was no opposition during the committee hearing. I move the amendment and a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 623 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 825, Senator Kramer, Health Facilities Delegation Inspection Authority, Related Institutions and Nursing Homes, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 825, as amended, requires the Secretary of Health, on request of a county, to delegate to the county the authority to conduct site visits and full surveys of nursing homes. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 focuses on delegating the authority regarding site visits and full surveys of nursing homes and provides that costs of a county conducting site visits and surveys be equally shared by the state and the county. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 825 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1041, Senator Guile, Alcoholic Beverages, Breweries, Wineries, Distilleries, Direct Delivery, and Direct Shipment, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1041 is a very good bill that will help our burgeoning distillery, brewery, and winery industry here in Maryland. As amended, it established permits issued by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission authorizing the direct delivery by a state-licensed winery, brewery, and distillery to a consumer in the state. The same permit and tax provisions apply to wineries, breweries, and distilleries, and each winery, brewery, and distillery must also hold a limited wholesaler license. The permit-holding manufacturer is also subject to strict age verification processes. In addition, electronic fulfillment of orders is authorized. Delivered products must be sealed by the manufacturer, and the amount of wine, beer, or liquor delivered to a single address is limited per year. Finally, the bill repeals limitations regarding the amount of manufactured products that may be purchased for off-premise consumption. The two amendments alter the title, are technical, insert a preamble, strike provisions regarding direct shipping of wine, beer, and liquor to state residents, establish direct delivery of the same products as just described, and establish reporting requirements. In addition, there is one technical floor amendment as well. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Senator has a technical amendment. The pages will please collect and distribute the senator's amendment. And once we have it loaded, Senator, we will get a quick explanation.
Mr. President,
Senator May-
this was just, there was an error that was found by the proofreader. It just strikes the word of, it was just a typo. Thank you, Mr. President. I move the amendment.
It was misplaced ofs. Thank you. All right, any objection to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1041 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Senators, I think it's getting to be Snickers time. I think it's time to maybe call it, leave some stuff for unfinished business. We got third readers, the only thing I think we have left, so we'll just leave those for tomorrow. Plenty of time, we'll take them up, they'll get over, maybe, assuming they get passed. Let's go ahead and check in with committees. We had a good day today, got through a bunch. Chair of Finance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance will meet at 1:45.
1:45 for
For
finance.
bill hearings and voting, followed by voting.
Bill hearings and voting, long day, excellent. Not too long. Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Triple E will meet at 2 p.m. And actually, there are two bills, one of which I don't think the Peters family's still here, but one of the bills we're going to hear is the Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of the Afghan and Iraqi Conflict Scholarship Program. That'll be one of the two bills we hear. And then we'll follow immediately after that with a voting session.
Wonderful.
At 2 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you.
Something's going on with that mic. We'll get it checked.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the timing is all in different places, but this is the order of what's happening today. At 1:30, we'll start with bill hearings, then there's voting, then Pension Subcommittee has a voting session, then Capital Budget has budget hearings, then we have a work group on transportation and a work group on Senate Bill 784, and hopefully we'll get all that done.
All right.
And for those who may be interested on the committee, we can count Tuesday as Wednesday if you need something to eat.
Very nice. Okay. Duly noted. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet today at 2:15 for a voting session.
2:15. All right. Additional standing committees, select committees. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from the 33rd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Anne Arundel County delegation will meet super quick after floor in the Silver Room. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Chair of Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Montgomery County colleagues, definitely this Thursday, immediately following floor session, we have two bills to vote, and we're going to try to do it right across the hall in the red room so everybody can just run over, get her done. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Prince George's County.
Yes, Mr. President, colleagues, tomorrow pending our schedule, 5 o'clock, Neil Room.
Excellent. All right. Additional announcements. Senator from Prince George's. Is there a vote switch here?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded in the positive on Senate Bill 738.
738 in the green. All right. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, let's do a quorum call.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Wednesday, March 13th at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Without objection, so ordered. Have a wonderful day, everyone. See you tomorrow.